utilities like other states are doing. So what this does is the Wisconsin Renewable Energy Development Authority would be an independent public entity, and it would expand investment in renewable energy and energy efficiency in our state. It would essentially form an 11-member board of experts, and they would be able to operate both a loan program as well as a grant program. They could provide technical assistance and do a lot of other things, maybe even helping them acquire technology licenses. So if you're a researcher at UW-Madison and you're patenting a new technology related to renewable energy, you could potentially get a loan or a grant from this Renewable Energy Development Authority, and Wisconsin could be a pioneer once again in renewable energy. This is really a way to say the state is committed to investing in renewable energy, but not only its utilities, the state itself is committed by both providing grants and loans to worthy individuals and groups who want to apply for this essentially seed money to finance their ideas, and or let's say it's a manufacturing plant. Let's say a manufacturing plant wants to come to Janesville and make solar panels for the state. That would be incredible. Well, maybe we could help, through the Wisconsin Renewable Energy Development Authority, help provide that upfront capital to get that plant going. So that's one idea. Last session I introduced it, and Senator Schultz sponsored it before he retired, so it was bipartisan. I don't believe it's bipartisan right now, but it's my goal to fix that, so we'll keep working on it. Here's another idea. Right now we have what's called an integrated resource plan that some states file with their Public Service Commission, and what I would like to see the utilities in our state do is basically, you have an algebra teacher in high school or college and they say, well, you've got the right answer, but you need to prove your work. So right now when utilities go to the Public Service Commission to say, hey, I want to build this new plant, hey, I want to increase my rates, they basically have to get permission. They don't necessarily have to show their work in the way that I would like consumers to be able to see their work. So essentially what it would do is just say, hey, we want to see your state energy plan. Why do you need this coal plant, or why do you need this proposed XYZ? Please tell us why. Please tell us how much the energy rates will be increased or decreased, and please tell us the outcome on ratepayers. And it's just a little more aggressive in terms of what the state would have to do to approve something. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can help us out. We have a local project we call an SDOG, School District Off-Grid. The big picture, we want supposedly, the school administration says we spend $2.5 million a year to heat and electricity in our school system, 19 buildings. And I don't know that that's true, but the goal of this, right now it's an ad hoc committee, but the goal is to get the school board to commit to doing that. Get local, we want to create some manufacturing jobs. We want to get local people with some experience, local businesses, to start manufacturing solar panels, wind stuff here that can be adopted to buildings of various sizes. So Fort Atkinson has a fairly comprehensive program going on that. But it's a multilateral project, not just to save energy or reduce costs, but also to create local manufacturing, local people getting those jobs and staying here, and then expanding it from there. We can probably eventually delete the administrative resistance in the school district, get a commitment to them, get a qualified bid, responsible bid to change that over and get the local businesses to commit to that and start manufacturing solar panels here, get them installed in the school district. We can then go to other government units, and those businesses can spread out. There's a tremendous amount of local resistance, which I think we can take out fairly easily. We need some help keeping the governor out of this. And this is Deb Colson Fiske if you do that. But to separate it out and just attack it individually with or without other subsidies. We need expertise. As I look at it, if there's $2.5 million, and just doing rough estimates, we sell bonds, we raise the money to replace it, the bonds are amortized out for 15 years, and we could, depending on the numbers and so forth, as much as $2 million a year the school district could save doing that, and have it paid for in 15 years with equipment that should last 20. The first phase is get the government out of the way so we can actually do this, rather than wait and hope that the state comes in and helps. And so is there some program that we can tap into that isn't gonna be deleted in the next budget, so that we can get this going?
That's a good question. I would say, I mean, if there's local funding, like if your county wanted to participate, you could reach out to them. As I mentioned, the focus on energy incentives are pretty scant, like there's not as much money, but you could start there. I would have to look and see how much, it's only a few million appropriated in this budget, and you have to, I'd have to look at your application to see if you'd be eligible. The other thing that you could do is,
Well, we need lots of help on
Yeah,
applications.
yeah. And I can talk to you about it afterwards, because there's like the Sunshot grant on the federal level, and there's a few options available. The city of Milwaukee has really pioneered a lot of solar initiatives and leveraged federal funding for that. So I can talk to you a little bit about that and put you in touch with someone over maybe in Milwaukee who could kind of help guide you through what they did to get to where they are now too. Yeah, excellent, thank you. A couple other bills I want to mention. Value of solar tariff. This is another thing that Minnesota is leading on, and I've talked to legislators over there. So, does anyone have a solar installation on their home or business? Okay, so right now there's this policy called net metering, and in states that have good net metering policies, more and more solar crops up, or wind. Here's what it means. If you're producing more energy than you use, you can actually sell that energy back to the utility. It goes back to the grid, and they give you a fair price for it. Now, over the years, utilities have drastically reduced the net metering rate. They've also reduced, they went from 100 up to 100 kilowatts of generation all the way down to 20. So if 10 years ago, you crunched the numbers, you looked at your net metering rate, you installed 100 kilowatts of solar and wind on your farm, and then decided, well, or 100 kilowatts of solar, we'll say, grid tied to the utility, and we're extremely energy efficient, and we're selling it back to the utility, you would have factored in, okay, my payback rate is, we'll just say 12 years. Well, now your utility has changed how much you can actually get back in terms of the per kilowatt hour rate, but they've also reduced how much they're willing to compensate you for. Instead of the full 100 kilowatts, they're only compensating you for 20. So your payback now has automatically increased X number of years, depending on what you put in, what the rate was, and so you feel like, wow, I started making my investment with really good numbers. Now my investment is 1.5 times worse or 2 times worse. It's going to take twice the payback time. Instead of 12 years, it's going to be 24, whatever it is. And I talk to people across the state who've experienced this, where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the utility changes the net metering rate, and your investment is a little less full of worth, right? A little less value. So here's what the value of solar tariff does. It is what I would call a complicated tariff in that it really calculates the full value. It isn't just calculating whatever the utility deems appropriate, whatever 8 cents a kilowatt hour they want to put in. It calculates the cost of avoided generation. So how much would it cost to create a new coal plant? X millions of dollars. Well, if 100 customers get 100 kilowatts and blah, 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 so you can kind of factor in that. You're saving utility money by giving them energy as opposed to them starting a new coal plant. That's one example. It'll factor in the environmental qualities. It'll factor in issues with storms, for example, and the grid reliability. So it factors in the actual improvements that this does for the utility and essentially forces the utility to look at all aspects, not just their bottom line. It involves stakeholders and a transparent methodology process, and I think it's important for people to recognize if members of the public are going to participate in solar generation, for example, what we call distributed generation, where it's all over the place, one house, another house, another house, another house, they should be compensated fairly for it, not given an arbitrary rate by their utility that changes every other year. What happens then? You're not going to invest because it's not as good of an investment if you don't know the numbers up front. So that's just an interesting bill that I put forward last year that I hope to see at some point. I keep on trying to convince utilities that it's in their best interest to do it too. Because down the road, do they really want Democrats to come in and change the net metering rate to 3 times what they want and then 4 years later have the Republicans change it? No, they want certainty too. So let's agree together on the best possible methodology that benefits homeowners, that benefits utilities, that benefits businesses, gives everyone the certainty to be able to invest, and it gives them a fair price as well. Finally, I think it's important to note that we cannot have a renewable energy revolution unless we figure out energy storage. That's really the key to all of this. Whoever figures out energy storage will probably be a trillionaire, right? Like that's how this all works. We'll be energy independent if we can figure that out. So I think we should spend some money and time on developing a cost-effective energy storage method that would help us result in a major expansion of intermittent sources. Intermittent sources of clean energy are sources that aren't always there. Wind and solar are examples. So when I talk about renewable energy in the legislature, I hear from some colleagues who say, well, that can't work because the sun's only out for a few hours a day. And it's like, well, okay, if you diversify your energy sources, that's simply not true. But if we were to develop a cost-effective energy storage solution, I really think that's how we become a leader, not only in the nation, but in the world. We should spend money on research and development. That investment will pay off tenfold down the road if someone cracks that code. So those are the bills that me and my colleagues put forward in the legislature. I think that they're good to talk about, they're good to educate both consumers, homeowners, businesses about, but also people who are on the other side of the equation, whether it's utilities, installers, site assessors, people who work in the fields every day, who want to make sure that we actually do have a good path forward for reliable energy, cost-efficient energy. I think energy issues are also homeland security issues, but also climate change issues. So a couple more ways for you to talk about renewable energy. I mentioned before, overwhelmingly across all parties and partisan ideologies, renewable energy is popular. What does it poll right now in Wisconsin? 68% of people support increasing state efforts to spur more renewable energy. So that's saying, yes, I want government to increase renewable energy. 68% of people. A 2012 poll found that 84% of Wisconsin voters support increasing our state's renewable portfolio standard to 30%. I couldn't believe that. I think that's amazing to hear. When I introduced my 20% by 2020, 30% by 2030 bill, people said, you should double that. And I said, well, let's get the first bill passed. 2/3 of voters in Wisconsin believe we should prioritize the use of clean, renewable energy over fossil fuels to meet our energy needs. So most voters also say, you know what, I prefer clean energy over dirty energy. And one other thing, in a more recent poll, people actually, it wasn't as much of a majority, but still a majority of voters said they'd be willing to pay more. They would be willing to pay more for renewable energy. Now, if I'm a utility executive and I see that poll, that tells me I've got to go with the group. My consumers are going to push me to distributed generation, to solar and wind investments, so I need to follow them, or I'm going to lose my consumers at some point when we find this energy storage route. So I think that's important to consider. When you're talking about renewable energy, it may feel like you're fighting an uphill battle, but most voters, most people actually really do support it, especially when framed against dirty energy or fossil fuels. I also think it's important to recognize, if you look at what goes on in the Capitol, the amount of lobbying hours spent against renewable energy is a huge amount. A great example being, does everyone remember when Jim Doyle proposed the Clean Energy Jobs Act in 2010? That was one of the most lobbied on bills, 15,200 hours of lobbying in the Capitol, more than anything else that legislative session in 2010. A couple of groups put in a lot of hours. The Coke Industries put in 1,124 hours. And I do not know if it's a coincidence that they've also been linked to the governor, for example. So that's something to keep in mind. How should we talk about renewable energy to the average person? Jobs, the economy, and that. They can save money. This is good for them, it's good for their children. Everyone wants their kids to be able to breathe clean air and have a good life and a good future, and for their children to have an even better future. I think it's important to engage advocacy groups like Clean Wisconsin, Sierra Club, League of Conservation Voters, small business owners and organizations. If you have a business that recently did a huge solar install, for example, get them on board with your local project. Engage homeowners. Everyone's looking to save money on their energy bill. Renewable energy installers, that's job security for them. There are Fortune 500 companies like Walmart and Kohl's that want to do huge solar investments in Wisconsin. So I think that there's plenty of potential to build coalitions. In Georgia, they have what's called a Green Tea Party. And basically, they found a group of libertarians who were very opposed to this anti-renewable energy sentiment. And they said, no, renewable energy is about freedom. We want freedom and property rights and energy independence. And I think when we can find those cross-partisan coalitions and leverage those in the Capitol, that can help us get things done. So that's something I'm also looking for. And finally, depending on who you're talking to, we do need to address climate change. It's one of our nation's biggest issues. And I think it's important to note there's still ways for us to lead and reduce carbon emissions. For example, if we continue to increase renewable power generation by just 1% every year after this year, we can reduce 6% of our total carbon emissions from 2011 by 2020. Now that gives me hope, because when you talk to climate change experts, they'll tell you, well, here's where we have to be, here's where we need to get down to. And it sounds very difficult. But if just 1% every year of new renewable energy, we can reduce 6% of total carbon emissions, that is helpful. We do still trail behind 12 other states with greater emissions reductions, so we've got work to do, but we've done a lot of good things over the past few decades. Pope Francis, has anyone read his encyclical on climate change? He's an inspiring leader on this topic, and I think it helps that he has so much credibility. He basically set a new moral directive for all of us. He called on every person who inhabits this planet to take action on climate change. He said, quote, mankind created this problem of climate change, and now mankind must fix it. As one of the world's top emitters of the pollution that's warming our planet, America has the moral obligation to act. When in doubt, use the Pope's words. That's what I think. So it's been a pleasure just kind of briefing you on what's going on in the Capitol regarding renewable energy. I do think in spite of our state's recent backwards climb on leading the nation in renewables, I do think we have the opportunity to move things forward. I think in the next few years, especially with the composition of the legislature, local wins are going to be crucial to building momentum for state wins. And I think when we can get places like Janesville leading the way, Fort Atkinson, I think Evansville also invested in clean energy, getting those kind of local wins and bringing them to the Capitol and having those legislators say, look at all the good I'm doing. Look at how much I saved my county government or my city government. Look at this energy bill. This is fantastic. Let's do this for the state. Let's have the state lead. I think that's how we get there, and then let's go up to the national level as well. So I would be happy to take any questions you have at this time.